Orion Jetways prided itself on an experience that transcended mere travel. It sold serenity at 30,000 feet. For its clientele, a ticket was an entry into a world of polished chrome, hushed tones, and impeccable service. Elara Vance, however, was testing that promise from the inside out. To the casual observer, she was just another passenger in seat 3A, a woman in a simple gray sweater and jeans whose gentle features were etched with the familiar, bone-deep wariness of a mother traveling with a young child. Her 5-year-old son, Leo, was a bundle of contained energy beside her, his wide eyes taking in the luxurious cabin of the Airbus A321neo. For Elara, this was more than a trip, it was a secret audit. 6 months ago, her investment firm had acquired Orion Jetways, a legacy airline with a sterling reputation but flagging profits. Her advisors had presented her with spreadsheets and market analyses, but Elara believed you couldn't understand a company through data alone. You had to breathe its air, sit in its seats, and experience its service firsthand, not as the billionaire owner, but as a customer. And what better test than to travel as a single mother with a young child? A demographic often met with sighs and subtle inconveniences by service industries. The flight attendant assigned to their section, whose name tag read Karen Shaw, seemed to personify that very sigh. Karen moved with a practiced, almost brittle grace, her smile a carefully painted mask that didn't quite reach her eyes. When she first saw Elara and Leo settle into their premium seats, a flicker of something, annoyance, perhaps judgment, crossed her face before being smoothed over. "Can I get you and the little one something to drink before takeoff?" Karen asked, her voice dripping with a saccharine sweetness that felt more like a warning than a welcome. "Just some water for me, please," Elara said calmly. "And could he have some apple juice?" Karen's smile tightened. "Of course." She returned moments later, placing the water on Elara's tray with a delicate click and handing the juice box to Leo. The service was, on the surface, correct. But the feeling it left behind was cold. As the flight progressed, the microaggressions began to accumulate. When Leo, growing restless, dropped a small toy car, it rolled a few feet into the aisle. Karen, walking past, stopped and stared down at it with theatrical exasperation before picking it up with 2 fingers, as if it were contaminated. "We need to keep our things out of the aisle. Mom, it's a safety hazard." Later, when Elara requested an extra blanket, Karen returned after a 10-minute delay, stating, "We have a limited supply for our full, fare passengers," before reluctantly handing one over. Each interaction was a small paper cut, designed to remind Elara that she and her child were an imposition. Elara simply nodded, her expression unreadable, making quiet mental notes. She saw the way Karen's demeanor instantly warmed when she addressed the businessman in the seat across from them. Her laughter light and her service immediate. Elara wasn't angry. She was disappointed. This was the rot she had suspected. A culture where service was conditional, where employees felt empowered to pass judgment on the very customers they were meant to serve. The problem with Orion Jetways wasn't in the spreadsheets. It was in the subtle, corrosive attitudes of people like Karen Shaw. The flight was only halfway to its destination, but Elara already knew that significant changes were needed. She just didn't realize how soon she'd have definitive, undeniable proof. The flight had settled into a low hum, the gentle drone of the engines a lullaby for most passengers. Leo, however, had reached the end of his tether. His initial fascination with the clouds had waned. His activity book was filled, and the tablet's battery had just died. He was getting fidgety, squirming in his seat and whining in the way only a tired 5-year-old can. Alara did her best to soothe him, speaking in low, comforting tones. "Just a little longer, sweetie. We'll be there soon, and we can go see the big city lights." To keep him occupied, she flagged down Karen for another juice box. A look of pure irritation flashed across the flight attendant's face. "He just had one," she said, her voice sharp. "I know, and I'm sorry to bother you, but it keeps him settled," Alara replied, her tone even and polite, refusing to be drawn into a confrontation. With a dramatic, put-upon sigh, Karen retrieved the juice. As she handed it to Alara, Leo made a sudden, clumsy grab for it. The small box slipped, its contents arsing through the air in a perfect, horrifying trajectory, splashing directly onto the front of Karen Shaw's pristine white uniform. For a moment, there was absolute silence. A dark, sticky stain bloomed across Karen's blouse. Her carefully constructed facade of professional poise didn't just crack, it exploded. "You have got to be kidding me!" she shrieked, her voice high and piercing. The few passengers still awake turned to stare. "Look what you did! This is a designer blouse?" Alara was already on her feet, grabbing napkins. "I am so sorry," she said, her focus on de-escalation. It was a complete accident. But Karen was beyond reason. Humiliation and fury had taken over. She turned her venom on Alara. An accident, or just incompetent parenting. "People like you shouldn't even be allowed in this cabin. You can't control your own child." The accusation hung in the air, ugly and loud. Leo, frightened by the shouting, began to cry. Alara's focus shifted to her son, her expression softening as she tried to comfort him. "It's okay, Leo. It's okay." Her calm demeanor seemed to enrage Karen even further. It was as if she expected tears, apologies, and submission. Instead, she got quiet dignity. In a final, shocking loss of control, Karen's hand shot out. The sharp, cracking sound of her palm, connecting with Alara's cheek, echoed through the cabin. A collective gasp rippled through the passengers. Leo's crying intensified into a wail of terror. Alara stood frozen for a second, not from pain, but from sheer disbelief. Her cheek stung, a faint red mark already beginning to bloom. Before anyone else could react, a man was there. David Chen, the senior flight purser, had been in the forward galley when he heard the commotion. He took in the scene in an instant. Alara's stunned face, the crying child, and Karen standing with her hand still half, raised, her face a mask of rage. "Karen?" David's voice was low but carried the unmistakable weight of authority. "Step away. Now." He gently guided a shaking Karen toward the galley, his body language creating a firm barrier between her and Alara. He cast one look back at Alara, his eyes conveying a silent, profound apology before he disappeared with his rogue colleague. What Karen didn't realize, as David led her away, was that the quiet apology from Alara wasn't a sign of weakness. It was the calm before a corporate hurricane. The slap wasn't just an assault on a passenger, it was an assault on the owner of the company, and the consequences would be as swift and severe as the act itself. The galley door slid shut, muffling Karen's indignant protests. A moment later, David Chen re-emerged, his face a perfect mask of professional composure, though his eyes held a storm of controlled fury. He knelt beside Alara and her sobbing son. "Ma'am, on behalf of Orion Jetways, "I am deeply and profoundly sorry," he said, his voice sincere and steady. "There is no excuse for what just happened." None. He then addressed Leo directly, his tone gentle. "Hey there, little man. That was scary, huh? It's all over now." Elara, cradling her son, gave David a small, grateful nod. "Thank you, Mr. Chen. Please let me move you," he insisted. "Why have a private suite in the forward cabin that is unoccupied? It will give you and your son some peace for the remainder of the flight." Within minutes, David had personally escorted them to the Riviera Suite, a spacious, secluded area with a plush divan and its own entertainment system. Once Leo was distracted by a new cartoon and a bowl of ice cream, Elara turned her attention back to the purser. Her demeanor was still calm, but a new sharpness had entered her eyes. "Mr. Chen," she began, maintaining her cover as a regular passenger, "I appreciate your help. Can you tell me what the standard procedure is for an event like this?" David, expecting tears or threats of a lawsuit, was taken aback by her analytical tone. "A full report is filed mid-flight," he explained. "The employee is grounded upon landing pending a full investigation by human resources and my superiors. An assault on a passenger is grounds for immediate termination." Elara nodded slowly. "And how often are crew members evaluated on their customer interaction and de-escalation skills?" The question was so specific, so corporate, that it gave David pause. "We have an annual review, ma'am, and some online modules. Is it enough?" Elara pressed, her gaze direct. "Is there a culture here that allows an employee to believe that striking a customer is, under any circumstance, a viable option?" He had no good answer. He could only answer honestly. "Ma'am, based on what I just saw clearly, it is not enough." Meanwhile, in the galley, Karen Shaw was doing little to help her own case. Convinced of her righteousness, she was complaining loudly to another flight attendant. "You saw her!" The kid was a nightmare, and she just sat there. "I've been with this airline for 12 years. They'll take my word over some freeloader who probably used her boyfriend's points to get into this cabin." Behind the scenes, a different plan was unfolding. David Chen was in the cockpit, speaking quietly with the captain and meticulously documenting every detail of the incident in his flight report, noting Karen's history of minor but persistent passenger complaints. In the quiet of her suite, Elara Vance pulled out her phone. She typed a short, encrypted message to a single contact, Marcus Thorne, the man she had hired to be the president of Orion Jetways. The message was brief and ice, cold in its efficiency. Code read on Flight 721. "Ground the crew on arrival. Await my instructions. Full audit of crew conduct policies effective immediately." She pressed send. The message was delivered silently, a digital harbinger of the reckoning that was now just a few hours away. Elara Vance, the passenger, had gathered her data. Elara Vance, the owner, was about to act on it. The aircraft touched down at the private terminal in New York with the gentle bumper of a perfect landing. As the seatbelt sign switched off, the usual sounds of post-flight readiness filled the cabin. The click of unbuckling belts, the rustle of jackets, the opening of overhead bins. From her post by the galley, Karen Shaw watched the passengers deplane, her expression a mixture of smug satisfaction and lingering resentment. She scanned the crowd for Elara and her son, expecting them to scurry off the plane in shame. She saw them emerge from the forward suite, the mother's face composed, her cheek now bearing a faint, purplish bruise. Karen offered a triumphant smirk as they walked past. Elara didn't hurry. She guided Leo by the hand down the jet bridge, but instead of heading into the terminal, she stepped to the side of the doorway, just out of sight of the crew. She waited. One by one, the last of the passengers trickled out until the cabin was empty. The ground crew signaled the all clear. The jet bridge operator prepared to retract the corridor. Karen and David stood near the front, a tense silence between them as they awaited instructions. Karen was already mentally drafting her report, painting herself as the victim. Suddenly, the hum of the jet bridge motor stopped. Heavy, purposeful footsteps echoed from the terminal. The door, which should have been closing, remained wide open. A figure appeared, silhouetted against the bright terminal lights. He was a tall, imposing man in a perfectly tailored suit, his silver hair lending him an air of gravitas. He was flanked by two uniformed airport security officers and a stern-faced woman holding a leather portfolio. It was Marcus Thorne, the president of Orion Jetways. Karen's smugness faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. A visit from the president on the tarmac was unheard of unless there had been a major security incident. David Chen, however, stood straighter, his expression unreadable, as he recognized the inevitable storm that was about to break. Marcus Thorne's eyes swept the cabin, taking in the scene with a practiced, authoritative gaze. His eyes met David's, and he gave a barely perceptible nod, a silent acknowledgement of a message received and understood. Then his steely gaze fell upon Karen, whose face was now a canvas of dawning apprehension. "Mr. Chen," Marcus said, his voice calm but resonating with power that filled the silent aircraft. "Thank you for your prompt and detailed report." He took another step inside. And then, from the doorway, Elara Vance stepped back onto the plane, Leo holding her hand. She walked past the stunned flight attendants and stood beside Marcus Thorne. The air in the cabin grew thick and heavy. Karen Shaw stared, her mind struggling to connect the dots between the quiet, beleaguered mother in 3A and the formidable president who now stood deferentially by her side. The final, impossible piece clicked into place when Marcus Thorne turned to Elara, bowing his head ever so slightly in a gesture of utmost respect. "Ms. Vance," he said, his voice clear and unwavering for all the crew to hear. "I came as soon as I got your message. On behalf of the entire company, I am deeply and profoundly sorry for this failure in our service." The name Vance hung in the air. Vance, as in Vance Holdings, the firm that had recently acquired the airline. Karen's face went from pale to ghostly white. Her arrogance, her confidence, her 12 years of seniority, it all evaporated in an instant, replaced by a single, crushing realization. The woman she had belittled, berated, and assaulted wasn't just a passenger. She was the owner. The silence in the cabin was absolute, broken only by the faint hum of the auxiliary power unit. Karen Shaw stood frozen, her mouth slightly agape as the terrifying reality of her situation crashed down upon her. Her world had tilted on its axis, and she was in freefall. Elara Vance's demeanor had undergone a breathtaking transformation. The quiet, wary mother was gone. In her place stood a commanding executive, her posture straight, her gaze sharp and unwavering. The faint bruise on her cheek was no longer a mark of shame, but a symbol of a profound corporate failure she was here to correct. "Karen Shaw," Elara said, her voice devoid of heat, but carrying the immense weight of her authority. She didn't need to raise it. The quiet intensity was more powerful than any shout. For 5 hours, you treated me and my son not as valued guests, but as an inconvenience. You met a request for service with disdain. You met a child's restlessness with open contempt. And when faced with a simple, common accident, you responded with verbal abuse and, ultimately, physical assault. She took a step closer. Your actions were not just a personal failing. They were a symptom of a cultural rot within this airline, a culture that you, as a senior employee, have clearly perpetuated. She gestured toward the woman with the portfolio. This is our head of human resources. As per Mr. Chen's detailed report and my own first-hand account, your employment with Orion Jetways is terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you from the property. You can expect to hear from our legal team regarding the assault. There was no negotiation, no room for argument. It was a final, decisive judgment. Karen crumpled, the fight draining out of her. Please. Ms. Vance, I have worked here for 12 years, she stammered, tears now streaming down her face. And in 12 years, Ellora countered coolly, you failed to learn the most basic principle of your job: respect. That is not a failure of time. It is a failure of character. The security officers stepped forward and gently, but firmly led the now sobbing Karen Shaw off the plane, her career ending not with a quiet retirement, but with a walk of shame across the tarmac. Ellora then turned to David Chen. David, she said, her voice warming slightly, your professionalism and integrity under extreme circumstances were exemplary. You protected my son and me, and you upheld the standards this company is supposed to represent. Effective today, I am creating a new role, head of in-flight service and training. It's yours, if you want it. Your first task will be to work with Marcus and HR to design and implement a new training program, from the top down, built on empathy and respect. David was stunned into silence for a moment before finding his voice. Ms. Vance, thank you. I accept. Alara addressed the remaining crew, her gaze sweeping over them. Let today be a message to everyone at Orion Jetways. Our luxury is not just in our seats or our champagne. It is in the dignity and kindness we showed every single person who steps on board. That standard is non-negotiable. We will be better. Later, as she and Marcus Thorne walked through the quiet terminal, Leo looked up at his mother. Why was that lady so angry, Mommy? Alara knelt down, adjusting the collar on his little jacket. Because she forgot how to be kind, sweetie. And sometimes, when people forget, you have to stand up, not just for yourself, but to make sure everyone is treated the right way. She took his hand, her mission on Flight 721 complete, her new mission for the entire airline just beginning. And so, Alara Vance's journey from an anonymous passenger to a transformative owner serves as a powerful reminder that true authority isn't about status, but about integrity. If this story of resilience and the fight for justice stirred something in you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring narratives about people who turned adversity into triumph. What was the most impactful moment for you?